Have you ever wondered why the quieter woman in the room is often the most captivating? Why the one who says the least somehow becomes the one everyone wants to understand, to reach, to earn? It's not a coincidence. In a world where women are conditioned to give, to explain, to prove their love, there's something deeply disruptive about a woman who chooses silence, who chooses to withhold rather than overextend, who knows that not every word needs to be spoken, not every feeling needs to be confessed, not every emotion needs to be validated. Because when a woman speaks less, a man has to feel more. He has to wonder. He has to work. You see, desire doesn't grow in certainty. It grows in space, in distance, in the unknown. And silent serial, intentional silence sees the most powerful unknown of all. Think of her. The woman who doesn't overshare, who doesn't rush to fill the silence, who isn't trying to win anyone over. She walks into a room and says nothing. But somehow, you notice her. Everyone does. Her presence demands attention not through volume, but through gravity. It's not that she doesn't speak, it's that she knows when not to. Carl Jung once said that everything we do not bring to consciousness appears in our life as fate. That includes the way we give our energy, the way we chase, the way we speak just to be heard. But the moment a woman reclaims her voice note by raising it, but by withdrawing it, something shifts. The dynamic changes. The power returns to her. So let me ask you this. In a world that tells you to give more to be loved, would you dare to give less? To pause? To let him sit in the discomfort of not knowing what you're thinking? To make him reach for your silence? Because what I'm about to share with you isn't a trick, it's a return to your center, to your stillness, to the truth that your value has never lived in how loudly you speak, but in how deeply you're felt. This is about 5 silent actions, rooted in Carl Jung's philosophy, that make men not just notice you, but value you, respect you, desire you, not because you asked them to, but because your silence left them no other choice. A woman doesn't need to speak to be heard. She just needs to know when not to. There's a moment in every dynamic between a man and a woman when something subtle but powerful happens. He says something off, something slightly cold, distant, maybe even passive-aggressive. It's not blatant, it's not cruel, but it's enough to sting, enough to make you wonder, did I do something wrong? That moment isn't random. It's calculated consciously or not. This is what psychologists call emotional bait. A quiet test. A man, often without realizing it, throws a hook into the emotional waters of the relationship to see what comes back. He wants to know how much power he has, how quickly you'll respond, how deeply you're attached, and most importantly, how easily you can be moved. Because the truth is, many men aren't looking for your words. They're looking for your reaction. Carl Jung had a word for this. Projection. We don't see people as they are. We see them as we are. And in relationships, this becomes a psychological mirror. A man might trigger you not because of what you've done, but because of what he cannot face within himself. When he feels insecure, he projects coldness. When he feels unseen, he distances. And when he's unsure of his worth, he'll try to make you prove yours. But here's where your power lives. You don't take the bait. You don't explain. You don't justify. You don't rush in to fix the tension. You choose silence. Not out of fear, not out of weakness, but out of strength. Because when you don't react, he has to. When you don't respond to the cold message, he has to feel the cold within himself. When you don't chase the conversation, he has to chase his own discomfort. When you don't jump to defend your worth, he has to question why he even challenged it in the first place. You force him into reflection, and for many men, that's terrifying. You see, most men especially are not used to holding space for their own emotions. They are used to bouncing them off others, making you the mirror for their unresolved pain. But when that mirror refuses to reflect, when it stands still and unshaken, they have no choice but to look inward. Your silence becomes the confrontation they've spent years avoiding. Take a common scenario. He sends a dry, half-interested message. You wait. You don't reply immediately. Maybe you don't reply at all. And suddenly another message comes. Then another. Now he's calling. Now he's over-explaining. Why? Because your non-reaction forced him to sit in the emotional space he tried to dump on you. When you don't say anything, he starts to say everything. When you don't explain your distance, he starts questioning his own behavior. When you don't absorb his projections, he's left with nothing but his own reflection. That's not detachment. That's mastery. And let's be clear, silence isn't passive. It's intentional. It's strategic. It's a declaration of self-respect. You're not abandoning the moment. You're choosing not to feed it. Because some dynamics don't need more energy. They need less. Some comments don't need a comeback. They need a void. Some actions don't deserve your reaction. They deserve your absence. This doesn't mean you never speak. It doesn't mean you always retreat. But it means that when someone is throwing emotional bait, trying to provoke or manipulate or measure you through your reactions, you stay still. You don't flinch. You let the silence speak for you. And what it says is louder than any defense could ever be. It says, "You don't control me." It says, "I know who I am." It says, "I'm not here to manage your discomfort." Jung taught that true transformation begins when the shadow, the part of ourselves we hide, meets the light. But that meeting doesn't always come through words. Sometimes it comes through your stillness, through your refusal to carry what was never yours. When you stop reacting, he has no one to play off of, no emotional echo, just silence. And in that silence, he hears something he's never had to before, himself. And it's in that moment, that exact moment, when you become unforgettable. Not because you screamed, not because you explained, but because you didn't. Because when you don't speak, he starts listening, not to you, but to himself. And in that space, he begins to see just how deeply your silence moves him. There's a kind of silence that isn't empty. It's the kind that follows your absence. The kind that lingers after you stop showing up, after you stop giving, after you stop chasing connection, that no longer feeds you. This is what we call energetic withdrawal. It's not ghosting. It's not revenge. It's not silent treatment designed to punish or confuse. It's the moment you decide to stop pouring your energy into someone who has done nothing to earn it. Carl Jung spoke of psychic energy. He believed our attention, our thoughts, our emotions, they all carry a kind of currency. And just like money, when we give it away freely and unconsciously, we end up depleted. But when we hold it close, when we invest it wisely, we become powerful, centered, whole. And here's the truth most people don't want to admit. Whoever holds the energy holds the dynamic. That means the person constantly reaching out, checking in, overthinking, waiting for replies. That person is not in control. That person has given away the very essence of their power. But the moment you pull your energy back, everything changes. You don't have to make an announcement. You don't have to explain why. You don't even need to say goodbye. You simply stop feeding the connection. Not because you hate him. Not because you're angry. But because something inside you finally whispers, "This is costing me too much." When you disappear, truly disappear on an energetic level, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, he feels it. He doesn't just notice your silence. He feels the vacuum. Because until that moment, you were the anchor, the pulse, the one quietly holding the connection together. You gave him somewhere to land emotionally, even if he didn't admit it. And now, that space is gone. He starts to feel off balance. He scrolls, waiting for a message. Checks the timestamp on your last post, replays your last words, trying to make sense of what happened. But there's no drama, no explosion, just stillness. And in that stillness, he realizes you're no longer holding space for him. This is what makes energetic withdrawal so powerful. It's not loud, it's not messy, it's clean, clear, devastating in its quietness. But let's be honest, sometimes we're afraid to disappear. We think if we stop trying, he'll forget. If we stop giving, he'll replace us. If we stop caring, we'll lose everything. But the truth is, If your presence doesn't matter when it's here, it will only matter when it's gone. You are not the reminder. You are the revelation. You don't need to explain your worth. You just need to remove your energy and let its absence do the talking. Now, let's be clear. Withdrawing your energy is not a game. This isn't about manipulating someone into valuing you. This is about preserving your life force. Reclaiming the energy you've scattered into people and places that haven't poured anything back. You're not vanishing to get a reaction. You're vanishing to come back to yourself. There's a profound difference between disappearing out of pain and disappearing out of peace. One comes from desperation. The other comes from discernment. When you leave, you're not hoping he chases. You're hoping you remember who you were before you made him the center of your universe. And maybe, just maybe, he will notice. Maybe the silence will echo louder than anything you ever said. Maybe your absence will make him face the truth, that you were never needy, never too much, never dramatic. You were just there, present, loving, until you weren't. But even if he doesn't notice, you will. You'll notice how much calmer your mind feels, how much clearer your body becomes, how much lighter your spirit is when it's no longer tangled up in the anxiety of waiting for crumbs. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious demands space in order to reveal itself. Sometimes, the only way to access your truth is to remove yourself from everything that distracts you from it. So here's the question. What would happen if you stopped holding the thread? What if you pulled all that energy back into your own body, your own life, your own healing? Not because he failed you, but because you're ready to stop failing yourself. Energetic withdrawal isn't punishment. It's power. It's you stepping out of the noise and into your own silence. And in that silence, something incredible happens. You hear your own voice again. You remember your own worth. You stop spinning around someone who never had the capacity to hold what you were offering. So, if you've ever felt drained from holding on too tightly, try letting go. Not with bitterness, not with anger, but with grace. Try disappearing, not to be missed, but to be remembered by yourself. You don't need to chase anything that is truly meant for you. Because when you hold your energy with reverence, the right people feel it. They don't need to be told. They just know. And they come know because you demanded it. But because your silence told them exactly where your value lives. There's a common misconception that boundaries need to be loud. That to be taken seriously, you have to raise your voice. To be respected, you have to explain, defend, demand. But real boundaries don't live in words. They live in energy. You don't have to say, "I've had enough." You just have to show it. When you stop initiating the conversations, when you stop over-explaining your silence, when you no longer ask, "What are you thinking?" or "Did I do something wrong?" You're not withdrawing love. You're asserting self-respect. That is a boundary. And that kind of boundary, the quiet one, is the one people feel the most. Carl Jung spoke about the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted by the world. The carefully curated version of ourselves built to fit in, to be liked, to maintain peace. We present this mask because we think it keeps us safe. But the problem is, the persona also keeps us exposed, because it gives people a version of us they can manipulate, predict, control. The moment you begin to remove that mask, not with a fight, not with a speech, but with silence, everything shifts. Suddenly, you're unreadable. And in a world obsessed with control, unpredictability demands respect. When he doesn't know where he stands with you, he pays closer attention. When he can't decode your every emotion, he stops taking your energy for granted. When you don't respond to his passive attempts for validation, he begins to question the version of you he thought he understood. This is the power of energetic boundaries. They don't push, they pull back. And in doing so, they reveal who has been leaning on your openness, your predictability, your overextension. When you become quiet, you become sacred, because silence says what noise cannot. It says, "I no longer have to prove myself to you." It says, "My time, my presence, my energy are not automatic." It says, "If you want access to me, you earn it." And this isn't about games. It's not about being emotionally unavailable. It's about sovereignty. It's about returning to yourself. Because the truth is, some people will only understand your worth once they experience your absence. Not just physically, but emotionally. You don't owe anyone explanations for your standards. You don't need to justify why you're no longer available for surface-level attention. You don't need to apologize for choosing your peace over pointless conversations. Let your silence do the talking. Let it say, "This is where my energy stops, and yours must begin." Let it say, "If you want to know what I'm feeling, you'll have to be present enough to notice." Because when you stop narrating your boundaries and start embodying them, the energy shifts, and those who are not aligned with that energy fall away. But the ones who are meant to stay, the ones who respect your silence, will listen differently. They'll listen with their actions, their presence, their consistency. They won't need a reminder. Your energy will be enough. Let me give you a simple example. You're in a room with him. The tension is high. He says something dismissive, expecting you to fight back, to react, to reassure. But instead, you look at him. You hold that gaze, and you say nothing. No pleading, no justification, no emotional chaos. Just a gaze, still, focused, final. That moment, that's not coldness. That's clarity. That is a boundary louder than any words you could have spoken. Because you're not silent out of fear. You're silent because you've outgrown the need to explain yourself to someone who hasn't taken the time to understand you. When a woman reaches that point, she becomes untouchable not because she hides, but because she no longer overextends. She no longer gives herself away just to be accepted. She no longer chases after people who only hear her when she's loud. And if you're wondering what that kind of power feels like, try this. Don't speak for 24 hours. Not to punish. Not to disappear, but to observe. Observe who reaches for you with depth and who only responds to noise. Observe who notices your stillness and who fills your silence with projection, because in that quiet, you'll see who's really listening, not to your words, but to your presence. This is what boundary looks like when it's embodied. It's not sharp. It's not cruel. It's calm, unapologetic, and profoundly clear. You're not silent because you're weak. You're silent because you know your worth. And anyone who deserves access to you, they'll feel that truth without you ever needing to say it. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And perhaps nowhere is that more visible than in the way we react, especially when we feel attacked. Emotional mastery isn't found in the ability to express everything you feel. It's found in the ability to observe what you feel, without becoming it. Silence, in the face of provocation, is not weakness. It's command. Imagine this. A woman sits across from a man. He raises his voice, says something sharp. Maybe it's designed to hurt. Maybe it's a defense mechanism. Maybe it's a way to reclaim control. But instead of reacting, she breathes. She doesn't flinch, doesn't justify, doesn't retaliate. She holds her posture, her gaze steady, her energy calm. And in that moment, something shifts. Not in her but in him, because he expected noise. He expected resistance. He expected the emotional fire that would allow him to step back and say, "See, this is why." But instead, he's met with a mirror. A still, quiet mirror that reflects his own emotional chaos. And without her saying a word, he sees himself. That is the power of emotional self-control. When you choose to witness instead of react, you take back the authority over your inner world. You no longer hand it to the person who pushes your buttons. You no longer allow others to dictate your emotional state. Reaction is survival. Observation is leadership. Let that settle in. Because anyone can react. It's instinctive. It's automatic. It's the easy way out. But not everyone can pause. Not everyone can hold the storm without becoming the storm. Silence, in this context, is not passive, it's active. It's the deliberate choice to stay centered when everything in you wants to scream. It's the discipline to sit with the discomfort without demanding immediate relief. And it's the deep knowing that not everything deserves your energy, especially not chaos disguised as conversation. Now, some will misunderstand this silence. They'll call it cold, distant, detached. But the truth is it's sacred, because it's the evidence of someone who has done the inner work, someone who has met their own shadow, someone who knows their triggers, someone who has stopped outsourcing their peace to the behavior of others. You do not have to engage with every provocation. You do not have to defend your worth when it's questioned. You do not have to match emotional volatility with emotional volatility. Sometimes, the most powerful move is no move at all, because silence says, I see what's happening. I choose not to descend into it. I am not here to entertain dysfunction. And here's the most important part. When you master this kind of emotional neutrality, you become unpredictable. You are no longer easy to manipulate. You are no longer a puppet pulled by the strings of fear, insecurity, or the need to be understood. You become the one who sets the tonenote, the one who absorbs it. That's what separates the one who reacts from the one who leads. The reactive one is always playing catch-up. The observant one is already 10 steps ahead. So the next time someone tries to provoke, you pause. Breathe. Observe. Don't explain. Don't argue. Don't plead. Just hold. And watch what happens. Watch how the energy turns. Watch how they begin to trip over their own words. Watch how the absence of your reaction forces them to confront the raw truth of what they just said. Not because you corrected them, but because your silence gave their words nowhere to hide. That's the paradox. You don't need to fight back to be heard. You don't need to match the volume to be understood. You only need to hold your ground with stillness. Because silence isn't always the absence of communication. Sometimes, it's the highest form of it. It's the unspoken boundary. It's the unshakable presence. It's the clearest signal that you are no longer at the mercy of external noise. You have met your shadow, and now you lead. Not from reaction, but from awareness. Carl Jung once said, "What is always present becomes invisible." And perhaps nowhere is that truth more evident than in the way a man sees a woman who is always available. When your presence is constant, it becomes background noise, taken for granted, expected. He doesn't see you not because you're not worthy of being seen, but because he no longer has to look. But the moment you choose to step back, something shifts. It starts quietly. He notices your absence in the small things, a message left unanswered, a routine left undone, a softness that used to greet him, now missing. At first, it confuses him. Then, it unsettles him. Eventually, it awakens him. Because when you're emotionally withdrawn, not punishing, but simply not there, his mind begins to reconstruct you, piece by piece, memory by memory. He remembers the warmth you brought into the room. He recalls the way you made him feel like the most seen version of himself. He replays conversations he once ignored. In your absence, he begins to reassemble a version of you. Only now, it's no longer filtered through entitlement. It's filtered through longing. That's the gift of intentional absence. It gives space for clarity, for both of you. It's not about disappearing to create fear. It's not about games or manipulation. It's about stepping away from the noise so that what was once overlooked can finally be felt. And make no mistake, what is felt in your absence will always be more powerful than what is demanded in your presence. Because now he has to work, to reach you, to remember who you were not just in his life, but in his mind. And something fascinating happens when you're not so easy to reach. You become valuable. You become rare. You become a choice, not a convenience. We live in a world that teaches women to be constantly accessible, to be responsive, to be ready, to never let a moment go unanswered. But here's the truth no one tells you. The more you're seen, the less you're noticed. The more you give, the less is appreciated. The more you're around, the more they believe you'll always be. But when you're gone, truly gone, not in bitterness but in sovereignty, you become unforgettable, not because you made him miss you, but because your absence forced him to sit with himself. And that is the moment where real growth begins. In that silence, in that emptiness, in that wide, echoing space where your voice used to live, he begins to ask questions. Not just about you, but about himself. Why didn't I see her sooner? Why did I stop listening? What was I doing when she was giving me her time, her patience, her presence? And more importantly, do I even deserve to have her back? This is where your absence becomes a teacher, not just to him but to you. Because as he begins to wake up, you begin to heal. You realize you never needed to be constantly present to prove your worth. You never needed to overextend to be valued. You just needed the courage to step back and let him feel the loss. Intentional distance is not cruelty. It's clarity. It draws a line not out of punishment, but out of reverence. Reverence for your own energy. Reverence for your own peace. Reverence for the sacredness of your time. Because access to you should feel earned, and anything that's too easily claimed loses its sacredness. So let me ask you, do you have the courage to sit alone while others chase approval? Do you have the strength to step back, not to disappear, but to let your energy speak for you? Because the less you show up where you're not cherished, the more your presence becomes a blessing, not a given. The less you fill the silence, the more powerful your voice becomes when you finally speak. The less you explain, the more you are remembered. He doesn't need another text, another call, another chance to feel nothing. He needs space. Space to realize what he let slip. And you need that same space to return to yourself, to remember that your worth doesn't shrink in distance, it expands. Absence doesn't make you smaller. It makes your presence larger, because you are not meant to be everywhere, for everyone, at all times. You are meant to be felt, and sometimes the only way to be truly felt is to disappear. So step back, let him look for you. Let him reconstruct you in silence. Let him remember the parts of you he ignored when you were always there, because the less you are present, the more your presence will mean. So now you know 5 silent actions that don't just change how a man sees you, they transform how you hold yourself in the world. Not games, not tricks, not emotional warfare, but principles, standards, energetic truths that create a different kind of gravity around you. When you stop reacting to emotional bait, he has to face himself. When you withdraw your energy, he feels the loss he never thought would matter. When you create boundaries through silence, he meets the edge of his own behavior. When you master your emotions, he sees a woman who can't be moved by chaos. And when you make your absence intentional, he begins to realize that your presence was never ordinary. These aren't just strategies for love. They are practices for self-respect, because this isn't about him. This is about you, about the kind of woman you are becoming, about the way you choose to move through the world with elegance, with intention, with power so quiet it makes the whole room lean in. You don't go silent to be mysterious. You go silent to preserve the sacred parts of yourself. You don't pull back to make him miss you. You pull back to remember yourself. You don't stop responding to punish. You stop responding because your peace is louder than his patterns. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming your true, undivided self. The self that is no longer fragmented by the need to be chosen. The self that is no longer diluted by roles, masks, and external validation. That process isn't easy. It requires solitude, stillness, silence, but it also requires courage. The courage to stop explaining your worth. The courage to stop chasing what should be walking toward you. The courage to trust that the man who is right for you will not need your noise to notice you. He will feel your being. Because a woman who embodies herself fully, who moves with depth and restraint, who speaks only when she means it, who walks away without theatrics, doesn't have to ask for attention. She commands it. She doesn't beg to be chosen. She chooses. And that's the difference between value and validation. Validation waits to be seen. Value knows it's already whole. So let me tell you something, woman to woman. You are not a gift to be granted. You are not something he earns by saying the right thing. You are not available on demand. You are not a subscription service for affection. You are the home he hasn't yet built within himself. And that means you do not have to rush. You do not have to convince. You do not have to compete. You simply have to be with dignity, with self-possession, with the kind of quiet strength that makes a man pause and realize, I can't reach her unless I rise. That's the essence of true feminine power. Not chasing, not pleasing, not performing, but embodying. So if you've ever chosen silence over justification, I see you. If you've ever stepped back to protect your peace, I honor you. And if you're just now learning to stop proving and start preserving, you're already on the path. And you don't walk it alone, because many of us quietly, steadily are choosing the same thing. To stop being consumed in order to be loved. To stop shrinking just to fit inside someone's comfort zone. To stop talking just to be heard. And instead, to sit still, to breathe deeply, to become undeniable not by volume, but by presence. So, if you've ever been in that place, where silence was the only way to save yourself, drop a comment. Say, I've been there. Or if you're learning how to step back, say, I understand now. Because this isn't about being cold. It's about being clear. Clear about your value. Clear about your boundaries. Clear about the fact that you are not for everyone and you were never meant to be. You don't need to make a man see your worth. You need to live like you know it already. That's what draws in the right kind of man. The one who doesn't see your silence as a threat but as a signal. A signal that says, I am not here to perform. I am not here to be consumed. I am not here to be decoded. I am here to be met. And only the man who's ready to meet you fully, honestly, without projection, will ever find you. Because you no longer chase. You no longer plead. You no longer fill in the gaps for someone else's emotional laziness. You walk. You pose. You let it unfold without force. And that, right there, is what makes you unforgettable. Because in a world that constantly tells women to do more in order to be loved, you've chosen to do less to be more. You've chosen to value your presence by honoring your absence. And you've chosen to speak, not with noise, but with silence. Because you've finally realized, you don't need to make men see your value. You only need to live like you know you have it.